I believe we're in the most competitive era ever in men's 15s international test match rugby. And of course, South Africa is sitting at the top of the tree. In today's episode of Inside Rugby with Mark, I'm going to talk about what I think the other nations have to make sure they don't do as they try and chase down South Africa. Let's get into it. Hello everyone and welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. If you're new to the channel, I'm Mark. I'm a Kiwi bloke who's living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. And until last year, I was sitting back, relaxing, drinking cocktails and enjoying my retirement. But I decided to come out of retirement and start this YouTube channel because I want to play a small role in helping the great game of rugby to grow across the world. And I'm doing that just by sharing my passion in these videos for the game of rugby. So if that's something that you can be connecting to and supporting, then I welcome you to come on board, hit the subscribe button, do all those other things you do to support YouTube channels, and let's come along for the ride. Now in today's episode of Inside Rugby, I thought I'd take a look at what I think those other nations need to make sure they don't do as they're all trying to chase down South Africa at the top of the tree. And of course, Rassie and the South African Rugby Union are doing a fantastic job at the moment in developing the game in the country and bringing through so much depth that's taken them to the top of world rugby and also back-to-back World Cup champions. A little bit of a story, and the story goes back to my younger days when I was not only a huge rugby fan, but I was also a very keen tennis fan and also a tennis player. And I used to play quite a bit. Now what happened when I was younger was I grew up in the era of players like Bjorn Borg, John McEnroe, Jimmy Connors, Ivan Lendl, and for my friends out there in South Africa, Johan Kriek. And those players really inspired me as a youngster starting off in the game. So of course, like most young kids that are getting into a sport, you want to become like one of your idols. And I thought I was going to be the next Bjorn Borg. So I went out there and I brought all the tennis gear that Bjorn Borg used, Donne tennis rackets, all of the Fila tennis clothing and all the other exciting things that he used to wear. And I tried to duplicate exactly what Bjorn Borg was doing on the tennis court. I had a very severe Western grip in my forehand and I was trying to hit a two-handed backhand and it just wasn't working out. And one day, one of my coaches pulled me aside and said, "Listen, Mark, what are you doing? What are you trying to be?" And I said to him, "Look, I love Borg and he's fantastic and he's winning all these tournaments." And he said, "Yes, but you're not Bjorn Borg. You have to do it your own way." And from that day forward, my life on a tennis court and also my life off a tennis court started to change. And that's something that I think is really important when we're talking about the current state of rugby around the world, particularly at the top level of men's 15 international test match rugby. And if I look at the likes of Ireland and New Zealand and France and England and Argentina and all of those countries that are now chasing South Africa, they need to be very careful that they don't fall into a potential trap. Now, if we go back to the Rugby World Cup last year, we had, I think, the most exciting Rugby World Cup knockout stage that we've ever seen since the beginning of the tournament back in 1987 in New Zealand. And if you'd remember those games that we saw in the knockout stage, we had that dramatic cliffhanger between New Zealand and Ireland in the quarterfinals. And then we had those three epic games involving South Africa against France, against England, and of course that 1-point victory against New Zealand in the final. They were all nail biters and they were games that could have gone either way in the last few minutes of those games, but South Africa were good enough. They came out on top and they were back-to-back World Cup champions. But given the fact that it's so close at the top of the tree, we've seen Ireland go to South Africa this year and win a test match in South Africa. Again, a very close encounter. And now we've just seen a relatively close encounter between the All Blacks and South Africa in South Africa. We saw England go to New Zealand and give the All Blacks a hard time. We saw Argentina beat the All Blacks in New Zealand. And we've seen Argentina thump the Wallabies last weekend in Santa Fe. So there's no doubt about it in my mind, we have a rugby environment at the moment that on any given day, these top teams can beat each other. But there's no doubt about it, there's something going on very special in South Africa, and we talk about the depth of the game. We talk about the multiple positions that Rassie's getting these players to play in and making sure that they're versatile. And of course, he wants to go to the Rugby World Cup in Australia in 2027 with 50 players that can interchange in all of those positions and be as good as each other. And that's quite an aspiration to have. And what I'm saying in this video is, I don't think the other teams should try to aspire to be like that. And if we look at teams like Fiji, and if we look at teams like New Zealand and France, we've got to think about the cultures that exist within those teams. We've got to think about the style of rugby that they play. We've got to think about the way the young players are brought up into the game and the style of rugby that they're coached and what they're nurtured into. And if you go to those different countries, like I have throughout my lifetime and watched rugby, you'll see that there's a lot of different things going on. And I think it's very important to continue to embrace your own local beliefs, and we're starting to see that coming out. We've watched France over the years. They've been a very spontaneous team, and right now Fabien Gaultier is trying to get them more disciplined and build their game around more forward power so they can use those backs in an expansive way by having more ball in play. We've seen England of recent times becoming more expansive and playing a more open style game. But if we go back to that Rugby World Cup cliffhanger last year against South Africa, it was their fantastic kicking game, their forward power that really put the Springboks under pressure, and it was a very, very close game at the end of the day. So what I'm suggesting in this video is that I believe the nations that are chasing South Africa, they have to do it their own way. There's no use trying to copy Rassie and what Rassie's doing in South Africa, because you don't have that group of players. You don't have that natural athletic tendency that Rassie's bringing through. You have your own set of players with their own skill sets and their own backgrounds and beliefs. And I think that's very, very important to embrace. You know, someone yesterday put a comment on my page about how in Argentina they have a lot of rural players playing in the Argentinian team. Well, that's what I connected with in New Zealand. We used to have farmers growing up in New Zealand that became mighty All Blacks. The Brian Lahores of this world, the Colin Meeses of this world, and even the Barrett boys, they come off a farm in Taranaki. So we've got to go back to our deep roots of the game in each of those countries and embrace those roots to really make sure our teams are playing the way that they're naturally gifted to play. And I think if teams do that, then they're going to have a better chance of beating South Africa doing it their way. Just like when I was a young boy playing tennis and my coach told me, stop trying to be like someone else, stop trying to copy him, be your own self, express yourself in your own way, and you will go on and be a better person. That's exactly what's happened in my own life story. So if I look at France and I look at Ireland and I look at New Zealand, even Australia, England as well, Argentina, I think those teams need to continue to adapt. I really love what Felipe Contepomi is doing in Argentina at the moment. And of course, a lot of that great work started with Michael Cheika as he started to put more structure and discipline into the Argentinian team. And now Felipe Contepomi, who worked under Michael Cheika, is continuing that work to embrace that belief. And we're seeing an Argentinian style of play now that is very exciting and very competitive. This is one of the things that New Zealand needs to be very careful of. Instead of putting their all energy onto what Rassie's doing and trying to compete only with South Africa, New Zealand needs to get back and ask themselves, what is their why? What is their DNA? What are they playing as a team? And that's, I think, one of the things that I'm missing seeing in this All Black team at the moment. I think it's important for Razor, if he hasn't already done it so it translates onto the field, we need to see his philosophy on where he wants to go with this team and then back the players that he thinks can execute the game. And as I've said in recent videos, I think it's going to take the rest of the Rugby Championship and the Northern Tour this year for Razor to really get across his philosophy and DNA into this All Black team. And the same goes with Joe Schmidt with Australia. I'm not writing the Wallabies off. Yes, they got thumped against Argentina on the weekend, but they had a very good first 20 minutes in that game, and I saw in that first 20 minutes the work that Joe Schmidt's doing with this team. He's got a group of really good players, I believe, and given another year, I think we're going to see Australia really strong in 2025. I think we're going to see them really competitive against the British and Irish Lions. Hey, just a quick halftime break here in the video. I just want to let you know that the only reason I started this channel is to try and play a small role in growing the great game of rugby across the world. To do that, I need your support and love on this channel. Here are 5 ways that you can help me achieve my goal by supporting one of these activities. Why not support me through 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 of these activities? That would be absolutely brilliant. So if you can do that, I would be really appreciative, and we can get on with the video now. Thanks very much in advance. Now, the great thing about what Rassie's doing in South Africa is it's pushing the envelope. He's the trendsetter. He's the one at the edge of innovation, and I think this is fantastic for World Rugby. It's making the other coaches think. It's making the other rugby unions develop their structures as well to become competitive with South Africa. But be very, very mindful that you need to develop the culture that is in existence in your own backyard. If we look at Fiji, remember what they did last year. They went to England, they beat England at Twickenham. They played absolutely fantastic. They excited us at the Rugby World Cup, but they didn't go as far as a lot of us wanted them to achieve. And I think it's important that Fiji doesn't lose the roots of its rugby and what it's brilliant at. We've seen them over the years, of course, being brilliant sevens rugby team, and the transition into the 15 has been a little bit harder. They need more time. I think they need to make sure they embrace their roots, their culture as a team, and continue to play rugby the way they are, but to bring more structure into their game as well. The same could be said for teams like Tonga and Samoa. It's pretty standard for the Pacific Island teams wanting to play this very open, expansive game, but they need the framework around their structure to be very good and competitive against the top teams. So for the likes of Andy Farrell, Steve Borthwick, Fabian Gaultier, and Felipe Contaponi, along with Razor Robertson, I think these coaches need to make sure that they stay focused to what's made their teams so great over the years and keep evolving from that. Yes, you're going to come up against a very powerful South African side down the track, there's no doubt about it, but you're also going to come up against other very competitive teams. And as we saw in the last Rugby World Cup, South Africa had to beat France, England, and New Zealand to win that Rugby World Cup, and they had the strategy in place to be able to do that. So those other teams that are chasing South Africa at the moment, in my opinion, need to go away and make sure they have the ability to beat the islands, to beat the Argentinians, to beat the English, and to beat the French. It's not just about focusing on South Africa. So there we go. I didn't want to upset any of my South African mates by saying that I think Rassie is bad. It's the opposite. I think Rassie is the trendsetter. What I'm saying is don't copy what Rassie's doing. Find your own way. Go out there and innovate in your own rugby world. We know in New Zealand, for instance, that the structure of New Zealand rugby needs to change. We need to have the availability of the overseas players. We need to make Super Rugby in some way more competitive and compelling as a product for the members of the community, but also to toughen up the players and get them to the level that South Africa are having by being part of the URC and European competition. That's very, very important. So let's see what we can do. I would love to hear your comments about this particular topic. Don't forget, I live and learn from reading what you think about rugby on all these great things, and that's another reason why I started this YouTube channel. So I thank you in advance for your comments. Okay, well that's it for this video. I'm going to be back again really soon. We've got some exciting conclusions coming up to the 2024 Rugby Championship this year, with Argentina hosting South Africa first, and the New Zealand All Blacks going to Sydney to play the Wallabies after their thumping by Argentina. I'm going to be putting out plenty of content before we get to those games about some of the opinions I have, and once the teams have been selected, I'll talk about those as well. So make sure you stick around here on Inside Rugby with Mark. And thank you all very much for your comments about the future of this channel. I've read them all. I'm going to take action, and I thank you again for your support in that area. Okay, until next time, it's time to say adios from beautiful Cancun in Mexico. No matter where you are in the world today, everyone, have a safe day, have a brilliant day, enjoy it as much as you possibly can, and I'll see you again right here on the channel very soon. Until then, it's bye for now.